we have to talk about the wind element in Zenless Zone Zero. Specifically, how I feel about the gameplay. This is not primarily pull advice, it's not a neutral take on the meta, nor is it a judgment of whether the wind element is quote-unquote good or bad. If you want to pull on Velina, or on any other wind elemental agent they release in the future, the number one thing I suggest you consider is whether or not these characters appeal to you, whether from a design, story, gameplay, or any other perspective. Don't let FOMO influence you. With that out of the way, let's talk about it. Before we talk about wind, we have to talk about Anomaly gameplay before the wind element existed. When Zenless Zone Zero went its early 1.0 to 2.0 versions, Anomaly was extremely boring. Well, maybe not so boring so much as mechanically simplistic. In 1.0 and 1.1, technically it doesn't really have much Anomaly gameplay because there weren't a ton of characters to begin with. We just had Piper and Grace, and that's about it. This is because, for a while, the only viable way to play an Anomaly team was Disorder Turbo. If you inflict an elemental anomaly on an enemy suffering from an anomaly of a different element, you get this extra damage multiplier called Disorder. Doesn't matter what elements are combined. Disorder Turbo, or DT, is a playstyle of having two anomaly units on the team of different elements, applying elemental damage of one onto an enemy until the anomaly bar is full, switching to the other until that element is full, and alternate between them, rinse and repeat until they die. It's an extremely simple strategy. The only kind of big mistakes you can make are ignoring the internal cooldown of roughly 3 seconds so as to not waste your momentum buildup, or triggering the same element twice without alternating, and thus missing out on the disorder damage. There are the occasional gimmick teams using anomaly agents like the infamous Monoshock, invented by player R2, which is a hybrid attack anomaly comp, or something like Miyabi Hypercarry, like Miyabi Lighter Lucy, or Miyabi and Nicole Astra. I've even tried the Inferno Medic gimmick with an attack agent and Bernice as sub DPS, but in general, the meta teams always came down to a DT playstyle. In my honest opinion, this does not make for interesting gameplay because it's a very low risk strategy. What I mean by this is that DT works for basically all non-resistant encounters. You don't have to consider multiple game mechanics to make it work. Stun windows? Not really necessary since Disorder generates extra decibels. Saving your energy for big moments of vulnerability? No, you poop, just spend it immediately or else you're wasting precious time. Route planning? Rotations? Not important. It's very hard to do it wrong, and once you've learned to play it once, you've already learned how to get a good score on any content. Love it or hate it, most players probably agree DT is a brain-off, mechanically simplistic strategy, and that goes for most Anomaly teams. During Season 2, with the introduction of Yuzuha and new boss encounters, players were forced to reckon with an increasingly toxic meta. The devs shadow nerfed Anomaly characters by raising all endgame build-up requirements by an additional 10%, as well as anti-anomaly bosses which directly targeted anomaly damage. This ironically made DT even more prevalent than ever because the old gimmick teams were now nearly useless. They didn't work anymore. As anomaly teams became more and more homogeneous, the game needed a new playstyle to make the class feel fresh again. With the release of ZZZ's 2.5 version, the game introduced not only a new Void Hunter, but also 2 new drive disc sets. Strangely, one set was designed for an Anomaly character, and even more strangely, its effect increases damage in the stun window. But wait, I thought Anomaly characters didn't care about the stun window. The introduction of the set Shining Aria brought a new wave of speculation to players. Their speculations manifested as the Agent Aria, the first Anomaly who actually wants a stunner. Namgung Yu, releasing in version 2.7. This enabled a new playstyle centered on the Bloom, which previously had been the exclusive gimmick of Agent Vivian, rather than DT. ZZZ also debuted Agent Premia on the sunset of ZZZ 2.8, whom also is capable of a Bloom. Players suddenly had more options to build Anomaly teams and craft rotations besides DT. They could also experiment with more maximizing damage by synergizing a Bloom and Disorder damage all in one. In my view, version 2.8 is the best state Anomaly has ever been in. It's what I'll call the renaissance of Anomaly. Compared to DT, A Bloom-centric team comps with Arya or Premia as the main DPS have a lot more things that could go wrong, which is more fun to learn. It's forcing you to be more aware of and keep track of many resource values simultaneously. For example, let's say I'm playing a Premia team in Deadly Assault. I may ask myself mid-run, am I building enough resource to be ready for the stun window? How close is the enemy to stun? How much Anomaly has been built up of each element? Should I spend all my Bloom resources on this opportunity, or should I go for a Disorder instead? Will I have enough resources left for the next stun rotation if I do? Is the enemy afflicted with the element it's weak to? And so on. It's very counterintuitive then that these limitations actually make for much more room for creativity and general brain damage, precisely because there are higher risks of making wrong decisions which leads to damage loss. And to be clear, this is what I value in gameplay. This is what I consider to be most fun. If you find many examples of meticulously constructed Bloom stun rotations, then that kind of proves my point. There's many from top players like Zik, Lindell, Cube, and others. Their showcases will demonstrate how complex and interesting this kind of gameplay can be when pushed to its limit. Their channels are linked in the description below, so if that sounds interesting, please go check them out. Alright, now that we've discussed how Anomaly has worked until now, let's address the win element in the room. My main problem with win is that it is too low risk and it breaks the game in an uninteresting way. My problem is not with the game mechanics themselves, which I'll discuss, but it's how it works in the context of the rest of the existing combat mechanics that we've just talked about. Let's fast forward to 3.0. ZZZ has recently introduced the win element, the first unique element to ever be added since 1.0, and it has just released the first ever win attribute character, Velina. Win has special properties unlike other elements introduced thus far, and this is great news! Right? Well, kind of. If you're watching this right now, I'm going to assume you're caught up with the basics of Win Anomaly, but in summary, Win replaces the Disorder mechanic with something called Vortex, which doesn't remove the Win attribute Anomaly state, also known as Windswept, and it doesn't care about which order they were applied. It also lasts a really long time, which is effectively forever. The Win element lets you form a team archetype of an Anomaly, Support, and Velina, the only available Win agent. The strategy of this archetype is nearly identical to that of GT, so I'm going to refer to this archetype as Vortex Turbo, or VT. Windswept has an extended timer, so you can just keep it off the unit permanently, even in a long fight. You don't really have to worry about it falling off. There's no cap on the number of times you can proc Vortex on, so you are incentivized to just trigger as many anomalies and vortexes as you can before the state runs out. That's the basic game plan. VT may not be the only way you can play the Wind, but you could, for example, play with a Bloom or Hyper Carry teams, but it's certainly the main way that the devs intended for and what gives highest scores in general. VT is essentially the new age GT comp, except they've solved the issue of losing Disorder with back-to-back Anomaly procs by just replacing it with a legally distinct mechanic. I want to reiterate that you don't have to really worry about refreshing Windswept because it lasts for the entire fight. Now, this isn't to say that there is no strategy, but you can in fact do more damage by not button mapping and utilizing your character's kits. Still, it's not a very hard strategy and something you could easily pick up if you're used to the Anomaly class. Now, I want to discuss FOMO and the pros and cons of pulling your first Win Anomaly character. Obviously, the game is moving in a direction that is chilling Win for the foreseeable future. It's a lot like how I and a lot of players speculated that Rupture would dominate the meta back in 2.0. Now, this didn't really materialize, and my account is proof of that. I was able to clear endgame content during Season 2 without a single limited Rupture unit. So my expectations are they'll do something similar with this new element as Rupture. Make it a premium option, but not necessary to just play and enjoy the game with. The choice to pull on Velina is up to the player's preference. Obviously, pull what you can afford. I personally think that the character's gameplay itself is quite fun. I've been playing Anomaly characters recently because of reasons, so it's an expedient pull. I am concerned that players could fall into the trap of FOMO and end up pulling Velina now, not vibe with her gameplay or her results, and become disappointed later. After playing the season's endgame a bit, I can confidently say that the Win Week 3.0 boss can be cleared with Season 2 characters with no additional mindscapes, I would have people take away that while having Velina would be nice, as it's the only way to meaningfully interact with the new introduced win mechanics, players who have been clearing up until now probably won't suddenly require Velina just to keep up. But hey, I think the way Velina interacts with the mechanics is fun, so I have no problem with the character per se, but I do have problems with how the win element is made. So to answer the question of win is actually that bad, I'm going to compare VT with the Aftershock team. Basically, this is the Soldier Zero Ambi team. This team looks really simple on the surface, and it is. All that's required on the base level to play this is to switch all the supports and sub DPS to occasionally refresh their buffs, on-field Soldier Zero Ambi to fill up the star mark, and then press E 3 times. There's more stuff you can add on, but it's not important for the average casual player. The casual friendly playstyle is like kryptonite to me, but it's still one of my most played teams because I like the characters, I invested into them, and now they've been one of my strongest teams in terms of raw DPS. This is to show not all attack teams have to be complex, and not all Anomaly characters are mentally bankrupt. DT and VT by association is a very similar situation. I wish it required more technicality at a baseline level, but I'll still use it since it's a reliable team that hands out clears without much effort. Overall, I think the idea of win as a unique element is cool, but there are a few things I think make it too easy to access and thus less rewarding to play. If I wanted to play game dev for a sec, here's what I'd change about it. The main change would be the timer. I'd probably reduce the timer to 15 or maybe 20 seconds, so even on win week content there'd be a short time when it falls off. This ensures a loop where you couldn't apply Vortex at all times and you have to wait for the resource to actually reapply it when the attribute state. This could also make for other dimensions in Bloom teams since you'd ideally want to proc it on the correct element, in this case wind. It's not as interesting when it's always going to be wind. I think the core idea between vortexes and disorders are actually fine and they could say it is. I'd probably add a cap to the number of vortexes that can be applied on Windswept to 3, and increase the damage multiplier on Vortex to compensate for that. This would probably impact agents that are able to apply Anomaly quickly, such as Piper the most, but it could also give rise to new strategies like element matching wind instead of physical, like everybody's been doing. I think the diversity of viable strategies is much more valuable than actually scoring high. But of course, if I were designing, I wouldn't want to punish players for pulling the new character. That'd just be silly. I'd also think it's good to note that Velina currently has one of the highest days outputs of any Anomaly character, so her synergy with the stun window is already quite good. That could change with future Anomaly characters, but for now we don't know that. I think these two simple changes could shake things up tremendously and make Anomaly into a more technically rewarding class with more risk of screw-ups and, at the same time, better ceiling for skill mastery. So this part's going to be unscripted, but generally I just think that the win element was kind of boring, and I don't hate Velina as a character. I have pulled her, as you can see if you've seen this far in the video, but I just think it could be more interesting. Like, they could just have changed these things in the beta and made a much more fun class, but, you know, this video has gone long enough already, so I expect you get my main point. And yeah, if you don't like it, if you're burnt out, go take a break and don't give it to FOMO. Hey, have a good one. Peace out, everyone. Oh, and before I forget, this video is sponsored by nobody. It's sponsored by myself. I'm not getting paid. My channel's too small to get ad revenue, but if you like this video and think I made some good points here, please share it around. It's a like or a comment would be very appreciated. Alright, that's it. Have a good one.